I have a really simple exercise that I teach people that I call emotional muscle building. So it's notice how do you get into a good state? What's it like when you're confident? What's it like when you're relaxed? What are the markers in your body, the tension in your muscles, your breath? You say, where are your eyes going? What are you thinking? All of those. And then noticing, think of a time that you start to just get a little bit upset or the start of an upset, because we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. You know it too well, but notice the beginning of it and then come back to the positive.
Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Ponto. Each week I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Joel Elfman. He is a hypnotist and performance coach, and for over 25 years, he's been helping people magnify the positive, transform the negative, and integrate the whole. He creates confidence, reduces stress and anxiety, and changes habits like stop smoking, weight loss, and other bad habits people pick up over the years. He studied hypnosis, neuro-linguistic programming, Tai Chi and somatic movement therapy, and much more. And he helps people connect their unconscious and conscious, both mind and body, and begin to make simple, elegant changes that get them out of stuck and have long time lasting impact. Congrats on helping people magnify the positive, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks, Karl. You know, you didn't mention one relationship, person to themselves.
Yeah, it's actually what we're going to get to here is that is actually something that is, I think the focus of this episode is that before people can really connect with the people around them, they need to be connected with themselves. And there's a lot of executives and leaders out there running companies who struggle because they have this sense of lack of fulfillment or lack of clarity in their vision of what they want to be doing. And it really stems from this lack of self-connection. So what are some of the ways you've seen people use like hypnosis or these other tools to really get connected with themselves on a deeper level that they might not have realized they were missing?
Well, when we slow down, we find ourselves talking to ourselves more. We can, or listening to ourselves more about what is going on. And we can also feel more of our emotions and what's going on in our body. And again, the more we slow down, we get to see patterns that we wouldn't normally see otherwise. So I ruptured my patella tendon about a year or two ago when I was doing some physical therapy for it. One of the things they had us do was just walk really slowly, take a really slow step, one at a time, one foot in the other. And when you do that, you feel all the forces pulling your body in all these directions that normally you just power through. So it's kind of the way we sometimes go through our day, right? We set this intention, we have to meet this deadline, and we ignore all those forces inside our mind, inside our body that are trying to pull us in different directions, and that we really need to listen to.
Yeah, and it seems like I've had guests on the show before who on paper are very successful. They have a big exit and they wake up the following Monday and they feel this sense of emptiness and lack of identity because they've been so wrapped up as who they are is tied to what they do and their business. And when they exit that, whether it's a sale or the business they have to pivot from it doesn't work out, they lose that sense of self. And it seems like the pace people are living at and working at makes it almost impossible to have that sense of connection with oneself unless you're really intentional about it. And so it's interesting to know what ways you found are good for people to build that habit of slowing down and listening to oneself.
Sometimes it's frankly, you got to put a timer on and, a bell to bell go off or set aside some time, right? These days, I've started to work out a little more or move. They say you're not supposed to sit in front of the computer more than 20, 25 minutes at a time before you should get up and move. So I literally have one of these little, clocks like they have in the gym, right? And set for 25 minutes, bang, 25 minutes go off, and I'll get up, move around, or I'll do something, talk to myself, we were talking about playing with kind of yogic sounds, Om and Ram and Lam, and some of those that really have this wonderful, give you more breath and vibration. So one of the ways to play. I have a really simple exercise that I teach people that I call emotional muscle building. So it's notice how do you get into a good state? What's it like when you're confident? What's it like when you're relaxed? What are the markers in your body, the tension in your muscles, your breath? You say, where are your eyes going? What are you thinking? All of those. And then noticing. Think of a time that you start to just get a little bit upset, or the start of an upset, because we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. You know it too well, but notice the beginning of it and then come back to the positive. How do I do that good state? So I'm feeling confident. Imagine myself getting upset for a second, and I come back to the positive. And I call it emotional muscle building because that is one rep. And the more I practice it, the better I get at staying in that positive state. And the more I start to notice how I begin to fall off at the smaller and smaller cues. So before I'm yelling or screaming or in despair, I can catch myself and come back. So that's one.
Yeah, I can see that being a very valuable exercise for leaders to do and executives do, because it's rarely one major thing that causes people to fly off the handle or react in a way that is harmful to themselves and the business. It's usually a lot of small things that build up that on their own don't seem that consequential, but when you combine them all together, it's that straw that breaks the camel's back concept. And so especially with how quickly things change and disruptions happen, and there's always seems to be 1,000 fires to put out for a business, having the awareness and the skills to notice these little triggers and be able to respond to them instead of reacting to them, and not let them pile up and become overbearing, is a really powerful strength for leaders to have, because there's always going to be things that need tweaking, and not having the capacity to manage your own emotions and be aware of what it feels like when you start getting upset or angry is a huge liability.
Right. And as you said, we have all this stuff coming at us. We have all these distractions. We have all these things that keep us busy. Plus the sheer fact that we're human and our brain is going to wander off into one thought or another. We're going to move from emotion to emotion, right? So anyone who wants to be confident or happy all the time, it's kind of unrealistic. That's not the human experience. But to be able to stay in a good state and then notice when you start to fall off and then come back to it, I think is much more important. So I say resiliency over perfection.
Yeah, the idea of like being in balance all the time is not realistic. And it's, if you look at someone who's on like a balance being a tightrope walker, they're always making these minor subtle tweaks. They're never completely on balance all the time, but it's about on average being balanced is the reality of what it's like to walk a tightrope or a balance beam. And so when you're with all the people you've worked with, I'd love to hear some of the kind of a case study or a success of when you've worked with someone who was struggling with this stuff and what the reaction or the results were when they had some practice with all those reps.
Okay, great story. So as a particular client I can think of who when she's processing stuff, when she's struggling a little bit, she literally has to feel it in her body. She kind of has to get into her gut a little bit, a little bit of the churning. And yet, while she's doing that, her brain is processing and comes up with this brilliant solution or a brilliant understanding of what's going on and the ways to move forward. So knowing that and having practiced this, at one point she was like, oh, I don't know if I can have love and money at the same time. So I said, okay, I want you to. And just before that, she was talking about X. Oh, sorry, no, different story. So, so I said, all right, stand up for a minute. And I want you to imagine you're one of those like big Russian bodybuilders, and you have a set of weights like 500 pounds of love and 500 pounds of money on the other side. I want you to just imagine like really pushing, so I could get her to do some of that internal processing that she does so brilliantly. And then at one, she just, okay, and let it go. And then she just released it. She said, oh my God, that was the best thing, just to release, those thoughts. And then, and then she, just, oh, wait, you know what? I can do this. I've done this in this certain situation. So she started right away to immediately process this, right? To find out she could hold both things at the same time together. It wasn't an either or. And there was still some work to be done. So it's okay, do some homework, practice this a little bit. And next week came back and she hadn't quite done the homework. On the other hand, she was now keeping a kettlebell by her desk and doing lifts. So she figured out her unconscious side. Wow, I don't want to do the whole thing, but I'm going to do my version of it this particular way. And the more she did it, she could work on the problem. And the beautiful thing is we did this for a couple of things. And then later on, when she had to make a couple of really important decisions, really important challenges, she knew if she just took a day or two to process and let it move through her system, she would come up with solutions. And she did.
That's awesome. And I like how in that story with that client, there's that mind over matter. Like if your mental state or like your thoughts impact your physical body, but it's also the same that your physical body, your movements, and how you move your body impacts your mood and your muscles. And like smiling makes you happy. When you smile, you release the same chemicals in your brain, make you feel good. And so, and for people that are trying to build these new habits, and listen, it's often easier to listen to your body first and your emotions and your mind second, just because you're used to kind of piloting your body around. So I like that in your example, you tied the emotional management to the weightlifting motion and the straining the muscles and making that kind of the bridge to influencing the emotions and the thought pattern that she had been operating under, and how when she kind of released her muscles after tensing them up and stuff, then she's also able to release the belief that she was holding of has to be love or money, can't have both. And then so the physical movements had the impact on the mental state that just trying to tell her, well, stop believing that thing you're believing. You can't, they're able to just override that belief in the same manual way she's able to move her body around. But the physical motions and the focusing on that kind of got her out of the mental loop she was in and allowed her to change the belief and the behavior. And I think that's something for a really valuable example, because of the key to improving your mindset isn't necessarily just willpower. It's about understanding your body and being really more in touch with yourself in that way. That's not as abstract or complicated for people to understand, because everyone understands like the importance of weightlifting and going to the gym, that sort of stuff.
But and people all the time, right, are doing some of these things. Like you just said, when you said mental loop, right, you moved your head a little bit like a circle, right? And people are doing that. Oh, I don't know what's going on. It's like they're telling you, right? And so, okay, we can take this, we can speed it up, we can slow it down, and say, okay, what's the natural way you can start to move out of this thing, right? So there's plenty of ways to play. How, when you're upset, or how do you naturally come back? How do you re-regulate yourself? How do you ground? How do you get back to balance, right? Some people putter, go for a run, go for a walk, play with their dog, whatever it is, right? These are physical elements that you're already naturally doing. Let's take advantage of them. You know, some school systems are bringing back cursive writing because they found out typing lights up only one part of your brain, right? When you're doing cursive writing, right, handwriting, it lights up multiple portions of your brain, so your learning improves. And the original visualization study, I think in the 60s, right, they had people shoot a basketball, and people imagine shooting a basketball. And when they tested them, their success was about the same. But when they combined them, the success went up by a significant factor.
Yeah, it's interesting the cursor versus typing thing you mentioned, because I can see how there's different muscle groups and stuff involved with typing versus writing. And then the aspect of like combining the mental and the physical side of things, I think is I've heard that before about shooting a basketball. I've done that before also with preparing for a presentation, where if you're just going to imagine yourself saying it, then you don't have to like practice the words out loud. It's just kind of thinking about how you say it actually helps you prepare them. So it's that same kind of concept when it comes to improving one's control of their emotions. And I think it's also valuable when you think about how it changes the way you show up, like you mentioned with body language and the head going in a circle thing. When you're working with a team and you're communicating with other people, they're going to be looking at and paying attention to a lot of the body language, the subconscious communication that we all read into. We're not on a optimal like awareness of it, what we're doing. But I think it's when people still pick up on him, man, he seemed tense, he seemed stressed, he seemed mad at me. What? And like you're communicating more than you think. So the more you're aware of how your emotional state and your physical body language and your movements are tied together, and the more you control yourself on those, then the better you're going to be able to communicate to your team, because you're less likely to communicate the wrong messages with the body language.
Right. And it's not, and we don't want to be trying to think about control all the time, right? Because then we're not being authentic. It's just taking up a lot of mental space. It's just getting much cleaner about being in our body in those moments and broadcasting those signals. They say at least 65%, and some people say more, of communication is nonverbal. So again, breath rate, tension in the body, and tonality. And if that's true, because people try those on literally when someone's talking to you, their mirror neurons are observing that and trying on the person's expressions and the tension in their body, and so they get a sense of what that's like. Okay? So my curiosity, if that's true, how much are we telling ourselves when we're talking to ourselves inside our body, right? Just that's how much more of that is nonverbal than just those words. And the other piece is, Botox is big these days, and I saw someone doing a video on, was it microderma abrasion or whatever, and talking about doing Botox at home. Well, Botox paralyzes, right, muscles in your face, and there are a number of studies that say when you have Botox, you're less able to access emotions because those muscles are frozen. So you can't express yourself as well to people, and people have a harder time understanding what's going on for you because you've frozen those muscles. And now
Wow.
people are going to do it at home without even knowing what, those what the effect of those muscles could be. To me, it's kind of like, okay, this is the place where I think we got to stop.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Joel. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a comment, subscribe. If you want to connect with myself or Joel, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.